Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show, where we celebrate the innovators driving change in the education industry. At Edison OS, we've worked with over 500 knowledge entrepreneurs to turn their edtech ideas into profitable businesses. Hi, Kevin. Good evening. Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneur Show. Thank you so much for taking time out to join me on this podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Our pleasure. Kevin, if you can, to start off, if you can walk us through your journey and how you got into education and admissions. If you can walk us through the journey, I think that'll be a good starting point.
Sure. It kind of happened a little bit by accident, to be honest with you. I guess to start with the education bit, after I finished undergrad, my degree was in international studies and anthropology. I was looking for jobs and I never really wanted to stay in the US, which is where I'm from. And I found a job to work in Dubai. And I said, well, why not? Let's go to Dubai and see what that's like for just 1 year. I was a teacher in Dubai and I didn't like teaching, oddly enough. Just not the right fit for me. I don't know if it was the environment I was in, the school. I love Dubai, but not teaching. And
Okay.
so I left Dubai to go and do my master's, something closer to international relations. And while I was doing that, I got offered to work in admissions to help pay some of the fees for graduate school because it is not cheap. And I found myself in college counseling. So it took me kind of not full circle because I don't think teaching and college counseling are equitable, but definitely back to a similar position. And I found myself really enjoying that side of education, which is more of coaching, more of working with people one-to-one or in small groups, which I really like. And since then, life has taken me many different ways.
Got it. Just a quick personal detour, if you are okay. You said, you didn't like living in the US. Any reason for that?
I was bored. Yeah, it didn't fulfill me in some way. And even my parents from when I was like 12 or 13 said, yeah, we know you're never going to live in the US anyways. And from really the first chance I could, I was out for the most part. I mean, that's not 100% true, but I was always, eager to travel, eager to move around. And now I could not imagine myself going back unless something monumental came up in life. I am very happy in Dubai.
Got it, Kevin. You said you started off with teaching, but then, you found yourself not interested in that. Could you
Yep.
deep dive a little bit into that? Like what exactly happened? Why?
Well, there could be a lot of things. I mean, I don't think it's fair to pinpoint one or the other because obviously one thing can move into another, Um, the program I was coming to was meant to be a teacher training program over 2 years.
Right.
And education in the UAE, for the most part, is for profit with larger companies, and that can be said for other countries around the world, of course, as well. And I think when the school I was working in just wasn't going to be profitable after year one, they said, you know what, we're going to change the plan and merge two schools. And when they merged, there was no room for that training program anymore. So I kind of saw that coming and said, I don't really feel like this is for me. So I'll move on. And soon enough, they moved on from the program as well. So kind of a couple of things happened from a corporate level. And then also, I think just personally, I enjoyed working with students, but perhaps maybe the age range was not 100% a match for me. It was primary, and now I'm working with upper secondary, so very different world. And I think perhaps also, and this is by no means speaking ill of anybody else, but I think my introduction could have been a little bit better to teaching. And I say that because oftentimes there is quite an extensive training period and sort of mentorship period. And I did have that, but not enough for what I needed. And at the time, I just didn't have enough experience with education and I think professional experience at 21 to really say that. So there were a lot of things, but that was kind of it. And I often look back and say, I wish I could have done something a little bit differently, then it would have been very different. Um, but c'est la vie. That's life.
Got it, Kevin. Kevin, you said after this you went on to do a master's program in cultural relations, if I'm not wrong. Is that what you said?
International relations, yeah. So it was a degree
International relations.
actually in diplomacy, if you will.
Oh, right, right. And while you were doing that to help you with your tuition fee, you were also working in the same college in the admissions department, right?
Correct. Yep.
Right, got it. So, how was your experience there? Because I did read, in your website, in your write up about in one of the websites that you are able to do a great job at whatever at whatever you are at right now because of the insights that you have um, uh, while working in the admissions department, like how exactly people look at your application and stuff like that. Can you deep dive a little bit into what happens there? What are the things that are looked into the student's application and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in it. I want to say a lot, but also I can't say a lot because there are so many different factors that go into it and so
Yeah,
many what ifs. But I guess to keep it as short and sweet as I can, working in an admissions office, you see so many students, so many different profiles and portfolios come through. You learn about who are those students that are really striving, who want to make change, and those students who just maybe are not there yet. And that's
right,
fine. It's a part of life. It's a development stage. And so if I'm thinking about a student and if I'm reading through their application, what would what kind of stood out to me was those students who were not satisfied with what they were given in whatever context that was, and we would evaluate that context. If a student's coming from, you know, a very popular area of Dubai versus a student coming from, let's say, I don't know, Mongolia, we would look at it very differently because obviously the context is quite different. But
right,
I would say that analysis of a student's case, of their interests, of their capabilities, based on what they have in their school, based on teacher feedback, based on their writing, their scores, it allowed me to enhance the work I do now because I can look between those lines and say, you know what, this on paper absolutely fine, but in reality, what the application is at the present moment we're working in, let's say if it's you and I would say, this is not enough, Jack. We need a little bit more.
right,
So that allows me to be a little bit more critical in certain places because I've been the person on the other side who's been like, that's not enough for Ivy League schools, even.
right. Got it. And can you how easy or difficult is it to just make those decisions just off those essays or the writings, because there's definitely not a conversation with the student while you decide, right?
There is very rarely a chance to even converse with a student in any case whatsoever. The communication is sort of like a here's my essay, you have to read it and learn about me. And that's the way we communicate. Very rarely do students receive interviews for their university applications now. You see it still, so it's not completely foreign, but very rarely does the person reading the application actually interview the applicant. Maybe it might happen at certain institutions, but not all. Um, and so when you think of that kind of getting to know the student and what they write, the essays are really the crucial bit. Whether it's a personal statement for the UK or whether it's the additional essay the student has to write for the US, these are called supplemental essays. That's how we really get to know what the students' motivations and passions are and how they articulate them. At some stage, of course, students will write maybe things that are cliche and standard, and we hear it all the time, or they use Chat GPT, and we know they do, all that kind of stuff. And at some stage, it's like, yes, okay, that all sounds great and wonderful, but it's not ultimately going to be enough. We want to hear from the person's truest beliefs and preferences. And a person who has that genuine perspective on what they wish to do or their viewpoints is able to articulate that across. But it is hard because at some stage you also have to think about when you get down to it, you only have so many students, and there are many other factors that go into an admission decision that a student doesn't have control over all the time.
Got it, Kevin. Kevin, I know you said that there are things that you can say, there are things that you cannot, but within whatever you can, if you can just give an example. You said a student coming from a popular place in Dubai versus someone coming from, say, Mongolia. But let me remove Mongolia since I am in India. How differently do you look at the application for a student that comes from India versus
Mhm.
someone who's applying from Dubai, let's say?
Yeah, well, that's I mean, for two places that have such strong relations with each other, they are incredibly different for so many reasons. I think everyone knows that, but um, I've evaluated students from India and from Dubai for two different institutions, and it is very different because the Dubai context is fairly standard across the board for the most part. Students have a usually a private education, which gives them access to um, various courses depending on their curriculum. Let's say we're talking about Indian boards, okay, so they have access to CBSE or IC, um, or other curricula, and that usually comes with some kind of activities before or after school, during school, maybe tuition, and then they also there's a lot of access to advising in Dubai. There are companies that do application support. There are school counselors who are amazing. As a school counselor, I can say those people do so much work, not because I do so much work, but I see my friends doing it too. Um, and people who are serve as like agents, which is a bit taboo in the community for higher education, but I'll leave that there. There is a lot of access to support
Right,
in Dubai. Whereas in India, it's not always the case for a variety of reasons. Local context, where a student's applying from, major cities, small cities, rural areas, awareness of international admission standards, access to testing, access to some of the application materials, access to the internet sometimes. There's so many other factors that go into play for an Indian applicant that there's more due diligence in that process. And also because the majority of Indian students are coming from the Indian boards, we also have to be mindful that their journey as a student is not the same as a student who maybe is studying a British curriculum in Dubai. So there are quite a few different factors. I don't want to say that one is stronger than the other, but I will say that, at least from my experience, it can be harder sometimes for a student from India to get to the top of that pile of the admissions, review and get in because there are just more applicants coming from there. And in the end, the context that a student is evaluated from is their school. It's not their state, it's not their city, it's not their country, it's their school.
right.
And if that school um, is strong, that's great. But if the school is not as well known or it's a public system, it can be a lot harder for that student to get through. Not always, depending on the school, of course, but it can be a lot harder for them. And I'm very much a person that wants to give that access to people, but of course, it's not always possible for every student.
Got it. Got it. I was gonna ask you a question, but anyways, I'm gonna like put it out and get it clarified from you. So I thought you are having this context, right? The Dubai context, the Indian context, just to make the playing ground level, because it may not. That's the reason why people like you come in and read the application, and that's the reason they're giving out so much of information. But I think at the end of your answer, I'm starting to think it's the richness of the experience. Richness not in terms of like material richness. I'm talking about in terms of the experience the student that carries from the school time is what matters for the college that's gonna let them in or not. Is that correct?
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, the student has to be able to articulate that, and yet not all students have a rich experience in high school. Sometimes high school is horrible for them,
Right,
but it's how they are able to articulate their desires and their passions. And when we look at applicants in the space of university admissions around the world, it doesn't matter what country we're talking about, where they're going, it's not fair. Let's just be honest,
right,
it's not a fair process because there are, um, like I said before, universities have other agendas also. It's a business for them. They're trying
right,
to
right.
money to afford their business, which is the university. So that alone creates a bit of an inequality, because if they take, let's say, 500 students who can only pay $5,000 per year, they're not going to make as much money. So they have to think about that while thinking about the quality of the class academically and in terms of diversity, inclusion, perspective, all these different things. So you can have the 100 fantastically qualified students from Dubai, but they all might have the same perspective or come from a very similar um, number of schools. Is that really going to be appealing for a university? No, it's not.
Right.
So it's not an equal process. And even we look at examinations as well. Students can do great on examinations, but again, not the top students get in like they might in India through the All India exams, which is a little bit different.
Got it, Kevin. Kevin, in your experience, wherever you've worked, how early do the parents or the teachers or counselors like you start talking to students about, their admissions process? Because you say it plays a role, right? So is there
Yeah, I am laughing because of a story I'll share in a minute, but
sure,
I'll
please.
get to the direct answer first, then I'll tell the story. Um, Usually, I have parents and students coming to talk to me about course selection when they go into high school. So let's say grade 9 or year 10 in the British curriculum. They start there to make sure they have the right sequence of courses. I
Right.
would say the real serious conversations about career interest, because as a university counselor, I'm also a careers practitioner. And I personally, this is maybe my own perspective, I really value career interest and the alliance of someone's innate personal preferences with what they do. And that conversation is really not fully well thought out and rich until about 15, 16. So we're looking at toward the end of year 10 or grade 9, beginning of year 11 or grade 10. That's really when students have developed cognitively to be able to articulate that, yes, okay, I really like to be in this type of setting, which leads me to a career in this industry. So around that grade 10, year 11 period is where a much more rich conversation about career interests can grow into a conversation about university plans. Now, it can happen earlier for some students, and that's great, but not always. You will find careers education being done in year 7, grade 6, all the way through what's called middle school in the US or the middle years, right up through year 13 or grade 12. But I would say the most ideal time for me as a counselor is to start working with students somewhere toward the latter half of year 11 and grade 10,
Right.
because they definitely need a year of preparation to be ready to even apply. And I'm saying a year as if it's like the most ideal, like without panicking. 2 years is even better, which would be 2 years as in grade 10, all of grade 10, and all of grade 11.
Got it.
Anything before that, it's too risky because things can change, and perspectives and angles of the application can change, but also student context can dramatically change too.
Right.
So that's that. Now, the funny story I tell, I'll be really quick about it. I once had a woman. I was working for a company at the time. She walked into the office and she's asking our sales team about university applications. And so she's talking and she knows what she's talking about. It's really great. And she's wearing a larger jacket. Fine. It's a little cool out in Dubai. I think it was raining that day it rained that one time in 2018. And so they finish the conversation. She gets up and she, just moves the jacket over and she is expecting. That's fantastic. And so my colleague goes, "Oh, congratulations. Is this your second child?" She goes, "No, no, this is my first. And I'm here to talk about university admissions for them."
Got it.
So in some contexts, parents will come before the child's even born to
Right.
have that conversation. I won't say where they were from because I want to be politically correct, but
Of course. Yeah.
it was very interesting to overhear the end of that conversation. I equally, like you, was laughing myself into hysterics. But neither here nor there, I guess, at this point.
Got it, Kevin. Kevin, I mean, I don't know how. I'm just trying to keep in mind my audience and, throw some questions out there, which may
Yeah,
be very tricky or difficult for you, but yeah, feel free to pass it. But my question is, you said, Indian students, now it depends on the kind of schools and stuff, right? Now,
yeah,
given the situation to be constant, we don't have much control over that.
no,
But doing what they're doing, if there could be, when you've read their applications, right, what could have been different? What could they have done differently that may have, helped them cross that line? Um, because it may help people, who are in a certain atmosphere, but maybe through their actions and behavior, things can give them a better outcome when it comes to admissions. So if you can share some insights like that, some examples like that.
yeah. Of course. I mean, there are quite a few things that can impact this, and um, part of it is a bit of an opinion. So I won't lie that it's a little bit of my professional opinion, and part of it
Sure.
is just statistics. So I'll start with the statistics part because I
Okay.
think everyone wants to hear that. And that, simply put, is the overall projection of a student across their 4 years of high school. So let's say grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12. So up to standard 10s and then up to the 12s. Um, Students will do very well. But the most important thing when we look at an Indian curriculum is students taking the right subjects and that progression making sense for what they want to do. And also meeting the entrance requirements for university. Because not every stream, yeah, so not every streams are suitable for a certain university for various reasons. So if the university is clear about that and says that we have entry requirements and we want the science stream or the commerce stream, then great. But in many cases, it's being mindful of the streams that a student is studying in based on their capabilities as well. Not every student is ready for the science stream, and not every student is ready for commerce with maths or science with maths and things like that. So I think that's really the first bit is taking the most challenging classes the student can handle, whilst also being mindful of expectations. That's an important thing as well. The next bit also, and this is just statistically, is most students from India want to be applying to medicine, engineering, or usually some kind of business management.
Right.
Great, except we have all of those already. So diversification is crucial because that's really where the universities will see something a little bit different.
Right.
There was one point in time where a university flat out said to me saying, we can't take any students from India into engineering this year because we already have so many that will flood our engineering school with students from India, and then the perspectives will become imbalanced. So there are times where there needs to be diversification of major selection, and students can get to the end goal without going through the same path that everyone goes through.
Right.
I'm like, at one stage I was like, please, can I have a political scientist from India who wants to study sociology? That would be great. But there
Right.
is a lot of that. And while I think students are trying to kind of expand their horizons, to use a cliche, maybe parents aren't ready for that yet, and there is a lot to learn from that. But at the same time, and while it might feel scary, that's how the student will truly, I think, flourish now in a day and age where you can have 3 different careers in one, or industries working in one career. So that sort of branching out is really crucial overall. And this last bit is now my opinion side of things. And I know that not every school or board system can do this, but there are 2 things that I personally found the majority of Indian applications lacked. Number 1 is activities that a student was truly excited about. and could articulate that in a certain way. There was a bit of like a missing of some joy in their application. Now I know that it's not always possible in a school setting to do an activity, but really where a student did something just because they thought it was fun.
Right.
And everyone has that in some way. For me, it's tennis. I love tennis. I've been playing since I was 11. I played professionally. Da 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 da. That was my love, and that's what I do for fun. But it's not my job. And
Right.
so it's that sort of what does student truly enjoy and what's fun for them at 17, 18 years old. That was often missing.
Right.
Um, and then a little bit further, and might be a little bit odd to think about, but I actually really missed the student or the student's relationship with their teachers. Oftentimes I read many counselor recommendations, many teacher recommendations, and they were just flat. Like copy, cut, paste, insert student's name, and done.
Right. Right.
And part of that is counselor and teacher education, and that's one thing a student can't handle. But really getting to know their teacher and getting to know their counselor and making that relationship solid and engaged is really crucial, because when there are so many applicants, we need to find a way for the student to stand out. And if those letters are not strong enough, it's just going to continue to be a flat line
Right.
when we look at the overall landscape. So if students are thinking about how they can stand out a bit more, it's those two things really that I was just like, please, can someone write me a good letter of recommendation like that so I can get to know this student? So yeah, that's a bit more of the opinion side of things. Yeah, there you go.
Great. Thank you. I mean, trust me, your opinions made a lot more sense, and it added a lot more value than the statistics. I think the statistics is one thing that's not going to change.
Sure.
But I think as a person who's played a role in filtering or admissions, if you can say that, I think it's got a lot of weightage to it. Kevin, just going back a little bit, you spoke about fun, right? You lacked the applications from India lacked um, the fun element, the activities element. Now, even in that region, there are there things acceptable and unacceptable? Because what is the spectrum of that fun? Where does it stop?
Yeah. I mean, if a student is having fun by, let's say, speed racing down the highway in Dubai, probably not appropriate.
Right.
Even though it does happen. Not by teenagers, thankfully, but just it does happen in general. Uh, I think when the student's looking through their application, they all have an idea of what's appropriate. Very
Right.
rarely can an 18-year-old not deem what's appropriate and what's not for a university application.
Right.
It's how they articulate that fun that's also quite crucial, and that's hard. That part is hard, because saying I just play tennis for fun, yes, true, but how to say that in a professional way is a little bit harder. And that's where I try to step in with my students that I work with and say, this is how we say these things a little bit different. But if a student just said, I do this for fun, I wouldn't be upset by that. It would be nice to see it. It's just how they say it. But of course, fun has a caveat to being appropriate.
Right.
But that's not to say that video games or playing the piano just for the joy of it is a negative thing. It's not going to make or break an application, but it's something that we get to know the student a little bit more about.
Probably they got to dig deep and talk about why was it fun for them, and
Yeah,
anything that's associated is what going to add value to the application.
right. And the thing is even video games or piano, I just use those two examples there at the end because I see them a lot, give a lot of skills. I mean, piano has motor skills, has auditory skills, has reading a different language. Music is a language. Students have to know about mechanics of the instrument of the piano, their own motor function, how their body works. If they have sore fingers, it's probably time to stop playing the pianos. And with video games, it's kind of a bit similar. It is, yes, motor functions, but it's also kind of really quick thinking. It's strategizing, and depending on the game, it can be a lot of other things. there are a lot of skills to be gained by that, which
Right.
a student can celebrate if done the correct way.
Got it, Kevin. Kevin, with your expertise and experience, you help students on a private capacity as well. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Is that okay to discuss this?
yeah. It's fine. It's not nothing that is you know off topic. Yeah,
Cool, cool. I just wanted to make sure, since because you're working with a school,
yeah.
maybe. Yeah. So, Kevin, a lot of aspects that I'd like to talk about. So, when you work with students, you limit yourself with the application process, right? You don't help them with the test prep process as such.
Oh, correct. Yeah, test prep not my game. I can help with study strategies, creating a study plan, advising which tests to take. But when it comes to looking at the nuts and bolts of a test, not for me.
Got it. And can we start off from here? How did you get what's the story behind you getting your first student who was non referral, who was totally a stranger, paid student? How did you land your first gig?
Hmm.
Trying to ask this question from a point of view, others, who are doing what you do, if they want to like do a side hustle like this, or,
Yeah,
something on this side. Yeah, yeah.
I remember. Okay, I think actually what it was is another video, just like webinar or podcast, kind of like this, where someone found me and found my email and found their way to me some way, um,
Right,
and that was kind of cool. And that's why I do these type of podcasts, is one, to share information and to share my expertise, but also because of course I like to work with some clients here or there. I don't take that many students per year because my focus is working with the school.
right.
But at the same time, I'm allowed to do that outside. And so when it does come to you know finding me in some way, it's often just through some connection, some which way or the other. It, referrals, yes, of course, happen all the time, but it can be random bits of information that come out of 5 years ago. So
Right, right, right.
in my next week.
So you got into doing this privately by accident, can I say that? Or was it intentional? You had a plan.
I don't think it's safe to say by accident. I worked for a company at first, actually, after I finished the admissions experience. So it was private in that sense. But of course, they were
Right.
coming to the company, not to me.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
then when I left that to go into a school setting, when I was able to do that in terms of contractual means, then um, yeah, it was just people finding me in that way.
Got it, Kevin. But currently, as of now, are you actively working on to maintain your steady flow of students that come to you privately? Do you have a certain number, and you uh, work on it a little bit in terms of sales and marketing to maintain that number? Or is it all your previous students referring new students?
A bit both. I mean, usually, actually, it's parents of previous students referring me, not so much the students themselves, because they're often in university somewhere,
Right.
or it's siblings. But yeah, there is a number of students that I take every year, and that changes sometimes, just because of whatever's going on and how busy that year is. But I do have a certain number, and they wherever they come from, it can be from many different places, and they can be all over the world, which is great. Um, I have worked for companies in the past, which helped me get students that way too, which is fine. But there are usually like a set small group that I work with outside of school.
Got it, Kevin. Kevin, so in this process, in while you work with the students, is there a time or a situation, when you have to talk to other stakeholders involved in the students' life? Say, for example, their trainers or their counselors, or is it just you and the student and the parents? Does it end there?
Well, I think it depends. it's if I were to say generally speaking, it's usually just me and the parents. Um,
Okay.
but that's not always the case. Uh, let's say, for example, a student goes to a
Right.
school where they don't know about the U.S. admissions process. I can say I'm an expert in that, and
Right.
so if a school has no idea what's going on, I might have to talk to the school and say, "Hi, this is what you have to do, and this is how you do it," or to how to show a head teacher how to fill out a recommendation form because they've never done it before. That does happen, and I can do that. I don't usually, but I
Right.
can. Or I help the student communicate with their teachers to say, this is how I want my letter of recommendation to look. Can you do that? I usually don't contact teachers directly because it can be a little bit awkward. Usually I'll go to someone with that sort of official status and say, I'm just here to help on behalf of the student. I don't mean to step in, and I always make sure I
Right.
announce myself and my intentions before doing so. But with teachers, it's a little bit different because they fall under other people in terms of hierarchy in a school. So that's that. Yes, I think also like I said, I do play tennis. I coach tennis at the NCAA level. It was a very big part of my life and still is. And so I have a specific athletes program that I run just for student athletes
Right.
where
Right.
I work with their coaches and I work with their trainers or whatnot to help them make sure they're covering the right things, in covering them in the correct way, playing the right events, all things like that. And so that's when I do step in. It's that package is very select because I have to really be mindful of, can I really support this young individual? But for the most part, it's just usually me with the parents. But I can go other stakeholders if that's necessary.
Got it, Kevin. I think I got my answer, because the reason I asked if you only work with the parents and the student, or do you go to those schools sometimes? I mean, do you interfere or interact with the school, is because you said there are times when the recommendation letters from the teachers or the counselors are so flat. I thought your intervention might kind of help students from that point of view. And
Well, that's tricky
I think that's what
because
you do sometimes.
I do, but the thing is in the end, I can never read the letters, nor can the student or the parents. They're confidential. So they're not permitted to see those letters of recommendation or reference. They're not allowed
Oh,
to see.
right, right, right,
And
right, right.
if they do,
Okay.
and the university found out, they would probably consider them null and void because the student cannot see them. They can ask to have information included, but their actual writing, I know that because I worked in admissions. But from a counselor perspective, I'll never see, the student who I'm working with, their teacher's recommendation letter. I have to trust that it will go through and be well written. So that I cannot get involved. That's a breach of confidentiality.
Got it. I think a general overview about how the admission process works can also be, communicated to the teachers. I think that's maybe a big need from what I heard from you. I think that's something that's missing here in schools in India. Teachers have no idea how their recommendation letter impacts students' admission chances. So I think that's the area that probably, things can improve. But Kevin, when it comes to the actual process of you working with your private students and parents, is it in person or is it online? If it's online, what are the kind of tools that you use?
Yeah, it's mostly online now. I mean, it was online even a little bit more so pre COVID, but obviously COVID changed how we use the internet. And so it's mostly online, just through Zoom, pretty straightforward stuff. Um, Google or Microsoft Documents is really helpful for the essay writing process, and of course, um, technology helps us with a lot of information out there. So oftentimes it's a very straightforward um, workflow, but it's lengthy. The application process itself, if done properly, in my world, of course, is about a 6 month prelude. So from the deadline date, you have to back up 6 months, and that's when you should be starting.
Wow. Okay.
So it's a half year process just to apply. Never mind to when you get your admission letter. Usually, if the student is is going through the process in my sort of program. Between when they start their application, right around the time, let's say April-ish, May, 1 year later, they're confirming their place at the university. So they're spending a whole year on this journey to when they confirm that place. From starting off with their university research all the way to the end. And it might even be a year and a half by the time they actually turn up on campus. So it's a long process. And there are ups and downs in that process for every student.
Got it. Okay, so you're saying the duration of engagement between you and your students or parents lasts close to 6 months or more?
My engagement with students and parents usually lasts 18 months,
Wow.
if not longer.
Okay.
So if they start, ideally when I want them to start, they'll start, but I basically am with them until they get on the plane. And then I would love to stay in touch afterwards if they wish. That doesn't always happen. But there is that. And of course, like I said earlier, if a student is working with me or is working on their university applications, from the ideal standpoint, it's even longer than it's another year longer. It's about preparation also. But
Got it.
it really depends. I've had students. There's a student now who I'm working with that I started working with when he was in 8th grade. So he spent 4 years of working together, and
Oh, wow.
he will
Okay.
finish applying in 2024. So yeah, it'll be 4 full years of working together.
Wow, great. So, given this, such a long duration of engagement, from the tech perspective, you said, your discussions are going to be over video conferencing platforms,
Yeah.
and, you're going to be using Google Docs. But do you use any other thing to kind of, store and record all these activities and engagement that happens? Is there a specific tool that you use, or you're just using whatever is available, putting together all of them?
Yeah, there are tools out there. I mean, I've used different platforms before. There is one platform I use with my school. It's called Unifrog. It's great. I love it. It's not really available for those outside of a school setting, but
Outside of the school, right?
that I know of, and maybe it is. Um, but there are other platforms that I've used before. I'm thinking of getting a new one, so can't announce that quite yet. But I can say that there are some out there that are really helpful. It just really does depend in the end.
Got it, Kevin. You said you're planning on getting a new one, right? What are the things? What are the most essential things that would make it most, compatible for you?
Being user friendly is really crucial because it's not just me using it; it's parents, it's students, on a mobile, on an iPad, and then eventually a laptop. Hopefully, it has to be user friendly. First and foremost, has to be colorful, simple. The UI and UX interfaces should be quite straightforward, nothing fancy. The language should be very simple because ultimately this process is stressful enough. Figuring out how to use a platform shouldn't be part of the stress, I would say. So, being user friendly is crucial and colorful and engaging, um, because at some stage there's only so much gray, white, and black we can handle. So those are some really important things. I would say being a one-stop shop is also very helpful, because platforms I've used before where,
Okay,
oh, you have to link to this, oh, link to that, do this, go there, go here. It can feel a little bit sporadic. If everything is located under one umbrella, so to speak, it's so much easier for the student to say, yep, I'm going to go onto the platform and do everything I have to do right in there, minus the actual application, of course, 'cause that's not possible.
got it, Kevin. Just help me understand a little bit here. If I'm, correct, or please, correct me if I'm wrong. I was thinking, when you're helping students with their when you're playing the role of a counselor from a point of view of helping them choose the subjects, all these things obviously tied to the admissions. I thought, a student is going to upload a document, you're going to probably correct it or give your feedback and then send it back to the student. I thought it's just one document which is, collaborative between the two of you. Is it just this, or, what are the other things? When you say everything, what are the other things that are that you do that a platform must have?
Oh yeah, I mean, there can be quite a few things. It really does depend, I think. Um, so, for example, let's just say a student wants to do research on universities in New Zealand.
Okay.
Well, finding a place where it has all the information is really helpful for a student to research about. Yes, websites for universities are always the first place to go, but kind of bringing all that together into one place is very helpful. A lot of students are a little bit lost with their career interests, and so a platform that has, let's say, psychometric assessments for career aptitude or interest understanding or even
Right.
personality fit, super helpful for a younger student to figure it out, or an older student. Um, a place that can keep record of information is also very helpful, like student statistics, document maintaining. I don't have to be searching through emails on emails for documents or even a folder. It's all right there. I can just click a button and there it is. Um, if the system is automated to send reminders of meetings or to send out notes of the meeting, also extremely helpful too. Um, these do exist. I just have not personally selected one for next year because uh, I just decided that I'm gonna try a couple different ones over the summer and see which one really lands. But yeah, it's a very much a workflow type of experience on this platform, which has many different dimensions to it. Yes, the application is the application, but there are other things that can help the the communication and maybe offline work. That's also quite helpful.
Got it, Kevin. Okay, great. I don't know what happened.
Cool.
Um, Kevin, so before we conclude, I just want to touch upon one more topic.
Sure.
We underwent this whole phase of lockdown, the virus. Students were home, and probably, that's where the online learning and online teaching also came about. Now, in terms of admissions and applications, all the students that stayed home for 2 years, how did it affect their entire uh, chances of admissions because of probably limited experiences that they might have had? The whole COVID batch, what happened to them? How did it impact the students' admission?
Well, I mean, this is kind of interesting to say, but we do the math. The students who will be applying this fall, graduating from high school in 2024, will be the last group of students that had COVID impact their high school experience. So
Right.
in and that year, grade 9 or year 10 is not the most, I would say, crucial in the statistical side of things from admissions. Um, it was the year after the grade 10 or year 11 results from the board exams for those countries that have it. So I think COVID is really leaving the space of university admissions from an impact, like what you can talk about type experience. It's not leaving completely because the remnants are still there. And that's online education, online bachelor's degrees exist, and much more so now than they did before. Online testing for English proficiency, like the Duolingo, TOEFL and IELTS are TOEFL is pretty much online. The digital SAT exists now, again online. A lot of that was streamlined because of COVID. They still exist and they're still required for some universities, of course, but the online bit was fast forward or put on fast forward. Yes, so those remnants are there, but the impact of COVID is going to probably not be discussed after this coming year, because it won't have impacted the high school experience. Of course, the learning and development outcomes are very different. Yeah, so the remnants of COVID in the sense of testing, moving online, being required, will still be there, and the optional bit of the SAT in America will still be there. But the learning side of things, where and how that affects the university admissions, is pretty much phased out because any impact on
Right.
grades and numbers is pretty much gone. Now, development and learning knowledge is a different conversation. But I think the remnants of COVID are pretty much out of the scope of universities now. Of course, minus the testing, which has changed tenfold because of COVID.
Oh, can you just elaborate a little? How has it changed because of this particular thing, especially tenfold?
Yeah, well, I mean, the SAT's all digital now. It was on paper before, or it's
Oh, right, right. Okay. Hmm.
mostly all digital. And they've changed their bands for it's gotten harder. You have online English proficiency exams like the TOEFL or Duolingo, which are primarily online. The SAT is optional now. It was never really optional before. Like it was optional, but now it became much more optional. Um, it's still required, and it should be taken from my own perspective, but it is technically optional at most universities. Um, and when we look at standardized testing across the board, especially in the U.S., they are looking at it with a grain of salt, to use a metaphor, because ultimately, when a student sits for these exams, they might not be
Right.
as aligned to them because of course, different curricula, where they're coming from, access, and that's become more and more apparent, even though it was always on the horizon.
Right. Got it. Kevin, just one final thing, just to go back a little bit so that the listeners can get even more clarity in terms of the services that you offer. With an example of, you said you're working with an eighth grade student, which is going to be like a long term thing, at least 4 years. Could you just describe in detail what the workflow is like, and where are the areas where you intervene and add value?
Sure. I mean, it really depends, because when the student joins is how the workflow looks. Um, Ideally, I'm supporting the student with developing their career interests, whether that's through an activity, through a project, through creating something
Oh,
new, through
okay.
joining something, the applications for all of that. I support them with understanding different countries and what it's like geographically, culturally, academically. Um, when it comes to students a little further down the line, we're looking at test prep strategy. We're looking at, let's say, extracurricular growth. We're talking about some major things related to their interests. Um, if the student is, let's say, coming from a board system that's 2 years, we'll talk about, okay, these are the results that you have. How are we placed for university? Can we go to and target certain universities? Because even from those exams, we can plan for the next 2 years and plan for the university experience, um, and what that might look like. So there's a lot of strategy underway. A lot of it comes around activities and interest, but then when we get to, of course, grade 11 or year 12, it's application focused, and that's when a lot of that becomes articulating research, looking at different opportunities for students based on their preferences, based on financials, based on best country or course for their major. Medicine is not the best in every country, but it's about understanding where
Right.
it's most suitable. And then, of course, once we get to that last year, it's the actual applications. I help students just understand the visa process. I don't help them with that, but I do help them understand what it's about. Of course, choosing the
Right.
university is also very important, and having those conversations to help them with that as well. So it's a full gamut of an experience for the student. And then, of course, like I mentioned, I help student athletes as well in a bit of a different way.
Got it, Kevin. And typically, how many hours in a week do you engage in a week or in a month? How many hours of time do you work with the s- students?
Usually, if a student's in grade 11 or grade 12, it's probably 1 hour a week of meeting, and then an hour or two offline of feedback or communications or questions. It can be more frequent depending on time of year. If they're doing an application or working on something particular, then yes, it might be more frequent. In grade 12, you're looking at many more hours because they're obviously applying. Um, and
Right.
then when it comes to a student who's a little bit younger, maybe 1 hour meeting a month and then 2 hours additionally per month of extra work. But it really does depend. Some students are just, doing their thing, and they check in every month, and that's fine. So it really does depend on the student and what they need.
Got it, Kevin. Kevin, thank you so much. I think all the topics that I wanted to cover while we conversed, I have touched upon everything. Thank you so much for sharing so much insights about what goes into the admission process
Thank you.
behind the scenes.
Thanks for having me. It's
And
been a pleasure.
Kevin, it's our pleasure. It's our pleasure. Kevin, before we leave, I'm just going to stop the recording.
Sure.